welcome. I'm Diana Martin. I'm the Executive Director here at Hourglass, and appreciate you all joining us today for our First Friday Forum on Lancaster City's public safety. Today we're joined by Lancaster City Mayor Danene Sorace and the new Lancaster City Police Chief Chief Mendez. Thank you so much for joining us. Chief Mendez was appointed as the city's first Hispanic chief this past July. Chief Mendez is a lifelong city resident. I think McCaskey grad, right? We got any McCaskey grads in the room? And has actually spent more than 20 years in the city's police department. Mayor Sorace and Chief Mendez are going to speak about the current state of public safety here in the city and some of the efforts around police recruitment and community engagement. So excited to hear more about that. We'll also have some opportunity from questions from you all, including the folks who are joining us virtually on the live stream. So if you're watching online and you have some questions, just drop them in the chat and we're eager to hear more about this conversation. So thank you all so much for being here. I also want to thank our First Friday Forum sponsor, Rogers and Associates, for making these forums possible, and also the Ware Center and Millersville University for hosting us. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our guests. Thank you for being here, and can't wait to hear a little bit more about this important topic.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon. Happy Friday, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I was just telling Wally that typically the first Friday in February is when I come, usually by myself, to follow the county commissioners and talk about issues of the city. But I have been totally upstaged this year by Chief Mendez. So you all want to listen and hear what he has to say. So we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation and look forward to your questions at the end. I want to just start by saying how I first met Chief Mendez. I was a new city council member. This must be 10 years ago by now. And I had the opportunity to do a ride along with the police bureau. And I walked in and was given a vest and was not sure what to expect. I was not expecting wearing a vest, but and I was paired with then Sergeant Mendez. And I was wondering, okay, they obviously selected him for a reason. What could that reason be? And it turned out that he was a city resident, a J.P. McCaskey graduate, and I knew that the Bureau was trying to put its best foot forward by pairing me with an officer that they thought I would like. And now look where we are today, which is really great. So I thought just to get started that Chief Mendez, can you just talk about how long you've served the city of Lancaster and in what roles you've had within the Bureau?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'll try not to disappoint. But I will say if I can just speak first, I was told, hey, can you just come along, introduce yourself? I'm going to be doing the speaking. It's just real easy. It's not what this is now. So, I will try to do my best, but I've been with the city of Lancaster for over 22 years. We just, my academy class just had our 22-year anniversary. We usually get together. There's only 3 of us left now. Started out in patrol like everybody does. Within a few years, I was given the opportunity to get on the bike unit and patrol the southeast quadrant of the city on bike, which was an honor for me because those of you know I'm from the southeast, so it was nice to be back patrolling on bike. Did that for about a year and joined the K-9 unit, and believe I had the city's first explosive detection K-9 at the time, so that was exciting. Along that time of doing K-9, I was also on the Lancaster County Special Emergency Response Team. Did that. After that, I just kind of went back to patrol. We, in a cruiser, I did some downtown investment district on bikes, so I was assigned there for a period of time. And did that for quite a few years. Decided to put in for the selective enforcement unit. Went back into that unit, which is a quality of life unit. Focus a lot on like street level drugs, disturbance type issues, litter. It runs the gamut of what all they do. Did that for a year. Took the sergeant test, got promoted, went back to the shift, was a shift supervisor, so I was out on when you met me, I was I was the first line supervisor for a platoon of officers. Did that for a few years, took the lieutenant test, got promoted to lieutenant, was assigned to the detective division, violent crime unit. They handle the shootings, the stabbings, the homicides, drug delivery resulting in deaths. Did that, supervise that unit for 2 years. Beginning of 2020, we had a retirement, and I was asked if I would go back to patrol and take over a shift that was struggling a little bit. So I went back to the shift, was a shift lieutenant overseeing the platoon, and did that for a year. The captain position opened up in 21 for patrol, and was appointed to patrol captain in 2021. And mid-2022, when Chief Bay left, I was given the opportunity to take this position, and here I am.
Very good. I think thinking about that trajectory of experience, I just want to impart upon everybody that the patrol captain has the biggest job in the police bureau and is often the source of the chiefs that come up through the ranks. They have all held that patrol captain position because it has the most responsibility, and it's supervising the street sergeants, which are the first level managers within the bureau, and they have a lot of responsibility on the street every day. So it's a pretty awesome trajectory.
Yes.
So when you were growing up on South Queen Street, Chief, did you ever think that you'd be the first Hispanic police chief for the city of Lancaster?
No, so I actually did not want to be a police officer. It was never in my, I know a lot of officers, like they wanted to be a cop since they were kids. That wasn't me. I think really early on, as a young kid, I thought I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly planes. Then I really got into art and thought I was going to be an artist. Life has a weird way of working out, and did a bunch of things obviously from then till now, and back in early 2000 took the police test and decided to work for the city.
And here you are. Okay. So what does it mean to you and to your family for you to be the first Hispanic police chief for the city of Lancaster?
So it's exciting. I know my family's proud. I never set out to be the chief. Even when I first became an officer with the city, one of the questions we asked new recruits is like, where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years? And I always was like, well, I just want to, at the time I thought, I just want to be a patrol officer for 25 years. That's all I want to do. And it was a great job. It was probably the most fun I've had. But to be the chief, it's exciting. I think more importantly, what's really exciting to me is not just being the first Hispanic chief, but coming from the city. I run into people all the time that I knew from school, and just the excitement in when I talk to them about, the chief of police is somebody like we grew up like.
Yeah.
He came from the southeast. Like, I think that's the more exciting part. Like just where I came from to the chief of police.
Yeah. So talking about where you grew up, sometime last summer, I can't remember, in the midst of the transition to you becoming chief, we had this conversation about our growing up experiences. And, most of you know, I grew up in the woods spent a lot of time in the woods of Juniata County, where I learned a lot of important lessons in life. And you grew up on South Queen Street in the city. But one of the things that we had in common that we talked about was the shame of being poor and growing up sort of embarrassed, and how we've come as, I'll say my age, 50, as now I'm like 50, learning how to talk about this. And I just remember you being like, yeah, I'm ready to talk about it too. And I was like, okay, so why is that okay now? And what was your journey through that?
So I don't know why it was okay. Something just clicked at a certain age where I felt maybe I matured more. I don't know, but I did come. My parents were probably two of the hardest working people I've ever met. My dad worked up until a few months before his death. My mom was 30 plus years with the county, but they didn't make a lot of money. They were just low end jobs. So we were very poor. And I think why it became important as I got older was, I believe that's what defined who I am, and it those things that we went through as a kid, I can remember heating, at the time I didn't understand why, but the oven door would be on and open in the winter and we're heating, it's open. I just thought that's what everybody did. I thought that's how you heated your house. I tell a story, and it used to be really embarrassing, but I tell it just to show how this stuff affects people forever. Is we used to, on South Queen Street, we had roaches in our house. And if you poured cereal, you looked in the cereal because you didn't want to have a roach in your cereal. And I don't know the last time I had roaches in my house, but I'm 47 now. And when I pour cereal, I still look like I just cannot stop that. And so I think the importance of it is it really does mold who you are as a person.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lingering. I can talk about that, and I have a funny story too that has to do with I never owned navy blue shoes because I only ever wanted to have black shoes because black shoes you could wear with lots of different things, and if you had navy shoes, in my mind, they never really matched. And so I remember buying a pair of navy boots like 2 years ago and was like, okay, I'm gonna have a pair of navy shoes. And I was telling Jess about this, and she's like, where did that come from? And I was like, well, because I could only have 2 pairs of shoes. I had a pair of dress shoes, and I had a pair of sneakers, and that was that. And I was lucky if I didn't have to get them at Goodwill. So yeah, all of the stuff,
So
right?
for me, it was white sneakers. So
Oh, yeah.
we would always get, I don't know if people remember Kmart and Nichols that were here, Super
Yeah,
Shoe.
Super Shoes.
And my mom would go out and she'd buy, it was Saturday morning when she was off, we'd go out and get shoes, and they'd be these bright white, and they weren't Jordans, or they were just.
Yeah.
And I can remember spending the whole weekend trying to dirty them up because I'm like, I can't go to school with bright white shoes from Nichols or Kmart or Super Shoe or something. But now when I buy, I know you've commented on some of my shoes, so now I do have a shoe thing where I will wear white shoes.
He's got a very nice shoe collection.
So
Yep.
the result of probably not having shoes.
Yes, all of the things. So you mentioned that you were interested in art, and so at one point you were an art student at PCAD, and I think that led to some of your interest in how you have led different community engagement activities in the city. And so one of them was painting with the police. And I just want, there's so much engagement that our bureau does, and from coffee with a cop and ice cream socials to painting to, coming out and having the kids, experience our police dogs, or come up and stand beside a really big horse, stuff like that. What is the point of that from your perspective, and why do you think it's important?
So the connections you make doing the small community engagement stuff will stay with you a career. And it was art was always something growing up that it was cheap to do. You could do it. You could kind of escape reality and just, draw or paint. So I always loved art up until college, because then when I went to the art school and I realized now they're telling you what to do, how to do it, when the time frame was. It was not fun at that point, so I stopped. But those small engagements, and we do a lot of the events like you mentioned, and painting with the police was a good thing because for me personally, and I thought of that during one of the, I went through Leadership Lancaster, and we were doing one of the presentations, and I was like, man, I got to do something. I have to do something. So that's what I decided, and I thought, I reached out with PCAD. They were great. We took it into the community. We were going to different areas of the city and doing these events. And, just the smile on some of the kids' face when, we would take, I say gifts, but we'd let them win prizes, but everybody won a prize. And they'd get like a drawing book or, paint set. And just to see the excitement on them from getting this small little gift. Those are stuff that those children are going to remember forever. And those are relationships that last long, more than this. And, not that long ago, I was up at one of the corner stores. I went in to grab something. And I wasn't working. And the lady was, the cashier at the corner store was checking me out. She's like, Officer Mendez? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, oh. She's like, I just have to tell you, you handled a domestic like 15 years ago, and you took the time to talk to me and connect with me. And she's like, I haven't been in a bad relationship since. I'm working now. Like, things are great. Thank you. So I tell all our younger officers, like, these community events, they're great, and we're going to continue to do them. But really, the everyday connections they're making are going to last a career.
And I often think about when people call the police, it's usually at their worst moment, and sort of how we show up to that is so important. And we're going to talk a little bit about, well, let's just go there now. We have been partnering with LGH and Penn Medicine with Alice Yoder and her team to train the city in being a trauma-informed city. And we started that in the police bureau. And so can you talk a little bit about what that means? And I mean, that little connection of connecting with a woman who you responded, it was a domestic violence or domestic situation, and she remembers you 15 years later. You were showing up with principles that are trauma-informed, and you probably didn't know it then or call it that, but can you talk a little bit about the training that's happening within our bureau now?
Yeah, so our entire police department has been through the trauma-informed training. Everyone went through the class. And like you said, the benefits it has for the community, but what we're also realizing, which was something we didn't expect, was the benefits it's having internally with our officers for their personal trauma that they're experiencing. We talk about, for the longest time in police work, when you talk about officer safety, it was always like, oh, a vehicle stop, or, you're going to a domestic and they're violent. And we've always overlooked all the other parts of health and being safe and mental health, even financial health, being responsible financially. So we're doing all that now. We are really trying to make sure the officers are healthy, because if we have officers that are mentally, physically, financially healthy, they're going to be better employees and they're going to treat the community better. And it's a goal of ours, and we're seeing some good effects of it right now.
So this is a not on our list, but I'm going to just go for it. Some of the things that Chief has been doing in the last, it hasn't even been a year yet, around culture within the organization, he's just spoken to in terms of like, hey, let's treat each other. If we treat each other well and we have a healthy work environment and we are taking care of all of the needs, we're going to do a better job taking care of the community when they need us, right? And that goes across the entire, whether it's a housing inspector, our fire department, all of the things that the city does. But being a police officer, first on the scene, they've seen a lot of really, really tough stuff. And then it's like sort of bringing that back and how do they take care of themselves. But another part of this is cultivating leadership. And so can you just talk about the things that you're doing around leadership and the next promotional test that's coming in May, and how we scrap the old one and we're like, you're making a new one?
Yes, so forever, the tests we used for promotional exams were not relative to the city of Lancaster. And we saw it more so with the last test we used. It just was, we're testing potential supervisors on stuff that does not matter. It's not important. A drug, some of the questions were like, well, drug terms in the 80s. Well,
Yeah, who
That's
cares?
not making good leaders.
Yeah.
So we decided we wanted to have our own test written. So we reached out to Harrisburg Area Community College. They run a MOPEC training, explained to them what we wanted. They said, get us the information, we can write your test. And, you know, just to be able to have supervisors that understand Lancaster City and Lancaster County, that's where we work. We don't, you know, yes, there's stuff we need to know, like leadership-wise. It's not just this area, but we want to test our supervisors on Lancaster City. And, you know, we haven't had the test yet, but positive feedback from it. It sounds like a lot more officers are going to take the test this time because they were frustrated with the test before. And, you know, won't know the results until we're done with it all, but we're excited about it.
Yeah, good, really good. Let's see, part of the ongoing work of the Bureau also is to become accredited. And you talked about, can you just say what MOPEC is?
MOPEC is the governing agency for municipal police officers. So they tell us what we have to do, what we have to certify in. They really control municipal police officers. They certify each officer to be a police officer. So
MOPEC has rules about how much time you have to go to training each year and, you know, different things related to being a police officer. But they also, is it MOPEC that's doing the accreditation?
No, it's another organization through the state chiefs of police.
Okay, so these two organizations are guiding the future directions of police departments. And so we've always obviously been part of MOPEC, but now we're going for accreditation, and there are not that many municipal police bureaus across the Commonwealth that are accredited, but more and more are pursuing accreditation. So can you just talk a little bit about that process, Chief, and why we're doing it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons why we're doing it. I think just to be honest, like a lot of the funding we get is going to dry up if we aren't accredited. So there's stuff that we can get that being accredited that we won't be able to get. But more importantly, like it gives us a clear definition, like on our policies. Like it says, like your policies must say this, this, and this. Your officers must do these things. We have a great police department. What we're realizing is, so we're in the process of redoing all our policies, looking to see what needs changed, what doesn't. And a lot of our policies are up to the standards already. So we're cleaning them up. Right now I have 2 captains assigned to redoing all the policies. Next step is we'll have our HR department look at them and then run them through the legal department. But it's a long process because with each, there's, I don't know how many hundreds of standards that you have to check off. And each one that you check off, you have to show like 3 examples that your department does it. So it's time consuming, but we feel really confident that we're gonna get this done real soon.
So one of the reasons why I'm excited about this accreditation, because we've been talking about it and just being able to get to it, is that if you're an accredited police bureau, you have the opportunity as a community to apply to get red light cameras. And red light cameras are super important, and you can clap, Adriana. Red light cameras are super important to achieve our Vision Zero goals. And in case you missed the really big news, the city of Lancaster received $12.7 million to utilize over the next 5 years to implement its Vision Zero program. And that is really focusing on high crash intersections. And red light cameras are super important because we know that impacts bicycle and pedestrian safety. And the goal of Vision Zero is to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries by 2030. Thank you. I was going to say 2032, but yeah. So these funds that are coming from the federal government are going to be a huge boost to that. And and hopefully help our police bureau not have to do so many details at intersections that are problematic. So we're looking forward to that. All right, let's get back to policing. So major challenge that we hear, well, I hear everywhere talking to my colleagues around the Commonwealth and the country is around recruitment. And if you could just talk, I mean, we talked about this last week at the State of the City, but I just wanted you to speak to this again because, you know, I think it's important that we understand where our staffing levels are, that we're okay, and that we have a lot of work ahead of us to recruit the next generation of officers. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
So currently we're down over 20. It's probably like more like 25 we know more retirements are coming. So we are, again, we're down a lot of officers, a lot of civilian staff, but we're still fine. We're still able to go out. There is no, our services are not going down. We're still providing the same service. But we're not the only agencies that's struggling. It's, you know, and it's not just policing, it's nursing, it's teachers. You look across the country, like there's a worker shortage right now. You know, I think with our department, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was the grants that brought a lot of like community policing, the officers. We had 24 bike officers back, you know, with those grants. So we hired a lot of officers back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they're retiring now. And, you know, with, you know, the results of 2020 and how, you know, the country's going, we now have that added with our retirement. So we're down a lot of officers, but we're doing you know, we have a recruitment team that's out. We are contacting every person that even shows interest via social media or a website. We give them a phone call, a text message. We're looking to partner with a marketing firm to go out and, you know, help us market the Bureau, because we have a great police department. You know, we have a lot of opportunity in our police department that other places don't. So we are working with them, you know, hopefully once we get one signed, marketing, we can do that. We're gonna start putting little QR codes on our police cruisers because they're out 7 days a week in our community. So if you're walking by with a cell phone, you scan the QR code, it takes you right to our website to apply.
And if you all have ideas or people in your life that you think you should talk to about becoming a police officer, do it. We want them. We want the best candidates. So Diana asked us to talk about a comparison to another city and sort of how we were doing relative to crime and calls for service and things like that. And so we have data here from York. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that for a city that is about 45,000, am I right about that? York. Yeah. They had 62,000 calls for service last year, in comparison to the city of Lancaster, which had 37,000 calls for service. And I thought that was interesting. And I think, can you just comment in terms of like your time in the Bureau? How have you seen calls for service change for the city?
So actually one thing, when we were discussing the numbers that I really wanted to hit home on when we compare to York and Reading and these cities is our police department investigates everything. So whether it's somebody damaged your flowers in your front yard, stole a card out of your mailbox, it gets assigned to a detective and we investigate it. These other cities don't. They're only investigating homicides and major crimes. So I think with some of our call loads, like where if you look at the stats, you might say, oh, well, there's a lot of property crime in Lancaster City and there's not in York and Reading. It's because people aren't reporting it. And our community is reporting it. They report everything to us. And there's that expectation that they want us to investigate it and solve it. Mm-hmm. So even though I think statistically our numbers are pretty much the same every year, we're not seeing the highs and lows. Every now and then it goes up with something and down, but we've remained consistently. I believe actually we're down a little bit from 21 to 22. But we're not seeing the violent crime these other cities are seeing. York City, over 20 homicides. We had 6 in 22. that's a huge difference from a city that's right next to us in the same size. So.
Yeah, and I know at the beginning of December when we had that sequence of shootings, it was unsettling to us because we were not used to it. You know, like it's not what we experience here in the city of Lancaster. And yet I know, and I don't watch televised news, I read news, and I read our local papers, and I read a national paper, but I don't watch, you know, I don't read the York Dispatch or watch like the evening news. So I miss some of the homicide, the frequency in which homicides are happening. But 22 is a lot. And so I always just try to situate myself back into our data here in the city of Lancaster, even though I know, and it is a concern when shootings happen in the city, especially when they involve our youngest, you know, our high school kiddos. And so if we could just talk a little bit about illegal guns for a minute, because, you know, we're at the State of the City address, and I'm talking about how heartbreaking and frustrating it is when I get emails about us picking up weapons from 15 and 16-year-olds. And then what happens that night? There's a shooting at McDonald's, and the kids that are fortunately just injured, not life-threatening injuries, were like teenagers, you know, like the youngest was 14, I think. And so it feels like we are awash in illegal guns in our communities, and Lancaster is no exception, even though we are exceptional in lots of ways. This is something that we really struggle with. So can you just talk a little bit about what your team sees on the street related to illegal guns, and you can talk a little bit about ghost guns.
Okay, so let me just clarify real quick so we don't get anyone from York mad at us. They had 21 homicides, not 22.
Okay.
So if anyone's listening, I don't.
Oh, right. Sorry. It's right there.
But yes, we are no different than any other community. So I try to keep that in perspective. Like, we talk about gun violence, we leave the state of the city and we have 4 kids shot. So we're not immune to that. There is an issue, there is a problem with illegal guns in our communities, not just Lancaster, everywhere. In 2022, I pulled some stats. You know, Lancaster City, we seized 115 firearms that were in relations to a criminal activity. Of those 115, 32 were possessed by convicted felons who were not legally allowed to possess a gun. We collected an additional 38 weapons that we did not charge somebody with.
And when you say that you didn't charge, where did we find these guns?
It could be a found weapon. It could be sometimes like with like PFAs where people have to turn their weapons in, protection from abuse orders. Sometimes people will come in and say, hey, like, you know, I want this destroyed. I don't need it anymore. Or sometimes we just can't charge somebody with it, so we will destroy it then once the time frame's up with it. But and just this week, I didn't even give you these numbers, but yesterday, we had like 5 more recovered handguns in the city in 1 week on juveniles that are just out with handguns. And you know, I broke down some of the numbers for age groups. They're really not a huge difference from like 17 and under to 30 to 40-year-olds that we're getting with handguns. I think the difference for me personally in 22 years here is when I first started, we didn't see juveniles with guns. In 2022, we had 27 children, 17 and under, arrested with a handgun. Like, that's just not, like, we can't have that as a community. Like, that needs to be addressed. The ghost guns, the issues with that, and most communities are starting to see them, is they're guns that you can order parts off of. Some of them are 3D created off of 3D printers, and they ship them to the purchaser and they assemble them at their house and they have a fully functioning gun. They're untraceable. They're unregulated, so literally anyone can go online and start and purchase and build a gun. Yeah, it's
Which just makes my stomach turn because they are unregulated and because we've I think just a couple of weeks ago, maybe I'm getting this confused, but we pulled over a car, I think on New Holland, that had a ghost gun in it and about 1,000 sleeves of fentanyl.
yes. Yes.
And that's a lot of fentanyl. That's a lot of lives saved, quite frankly, when we can recover that amount of a lethal drug off the street.
Yeah, and last year alone, the city of Lancaster recovered 9 ghost guns, which, I mean, 9 might not seem like a lot, but that's just what we recovered, 9.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yep. Okay, so we're coming to close, and I think I just wanted to, my last question, so when Chief says that he didn't really want to be the police chief, like when he was coming up, or I don't think that he really thought about being the police chief until like last year. So what's the best part about the job, Chief?
so actually, it's been really good. It again, like, we have a great department. The officers are out working. They are making my life easy. I'd say the best part, just with some of the leadership changes we can make, and it's really just making the changes that when you come up in an agency or anywhere really, like any business you work at, and you see stuff that you think is wrong or you should be doing different, now being able to be the one to change those things. And one of my favorite sayings is, quotes is, be the change you want to see in the world. So I put that on all my stuff, and for me with the departments, like, make the changes that I've wanted to make.
Yeah, because you're the boss. Very good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give him a hand.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll turn it over. We have a chance to do some questions or feedback from the audience. I did want to tell you that there are a group of middle school students who are watching on the live stream today, who are really interested in this topic that you brought up of gun safety in our community. So they actually wrote to me, asked if they could join the live stream, and wanted to know if you had any ideas about how we can stop this flow of illegal guns into our community. And they even asked actually if there's any opportunity with the city pursuing home rule, if we could, there's a lot of state and federal laws around guns, and just wanted to know if that would have any impact on our community moving forward on this topic. So I just wanted to give them a shout out for watching and see if you had any thoughts on hearing from our youth audience about how we could stem some of the flow of illegal guns into our community.
You do that part, I'll do home rule.
Okay, so I'm actually in a meeting next week to discuss this with some local leaders, religious leaders, and community members. I've said this numerous times with illegal drugs, and I think it's the same thing with firearms. Like, you're not going to police your way out of the drug epidemic or the gun violence. It's a community issue. And we need everybody in the community to do their part. It starts at the homes. It starts, with schools, religious organizations, neighborhoods. Neighbors need to be involved with everything. I don't think any politician or any police executive or police department is going to fix this problem until the community decides they've had enough, and we all do our part. Sit down and come up with ideas.
Well, I guess that's, here's your chance to weigh in, right?
Yeah.
People have some ideas. Well, let me go to the room. Do people have questions or comments? We'll have a couple mics, so I'll try to circulate them around. You don't hear anything from the microphone. This is so the folks on the live stream can hear you.
Thanks. So in light of the $12.7 million federal grant the city received supporting the Vision Zero initiative, I'm just curious how the department plans to train officers to better protect vulnerable road users such as pedestrians, cyclists, wheelchair users. We're in Lancaster, so buggies, et cetera, in Lancaster City.
So, I'm sorry, you said how we're going to train or how we're going to address the issues?
Well, train officers, especially officers that we see driving around. Unfortunately, we tend to see a lot of not great behavior in all motorists, and that does include officers too. And I'm just wondering how we are going to see better training for our officers to uphold Vision Zero, be it making it, so pedestrians can actually cross in crosswalks, which is state law, things like that.
So Adriana, one of the things I think is going to help us is that we're going to have more cops on bikes. So and if you can just talk a little bit about, we've reestablished the bike patrol. They are pretty excited about having some electric bikes that we got through a grant. So I think now people are like, oh yeah, we'll be out on bikes. So their experience, more officers' experience riding on our streets is going to be really helpful. So I'll just say that, and then anything else Chief wants to add.
Yeah, and we do twice a year, we do mandated trainings, and we cover a lot of stuff with that. So we have a whole unit that's actually just what they do, is traffic stuff. We are constantly training. That is, with anything, it sometimes always needs revisited. But we do a lot of details where we will put officers out in plain clothes acting as pedestrians crossing the street, and we'll set up details where then, if there's a vehicle that violates the law, we'll have somebody stop them. The officer that's in plain clothes will call it out. But we do a lot of details per year for that.
More questions in the... Here, Linda, do you want to...
A few years ago, can you hear me? You had a program whereby you were trying to get more natives of our town to join the police force, and they could have internships at the force, and they'd be paid, and they would go to a sort of a junior police academy, as I recall. Is that program still intact?
So we have the cadet program. Yes, it still is. We are, like every position, we're struggling to get candidates. So if you have a young person that's interested, send them our way. I don't have the numbers here, but I think we're allotted 5, but we have the budget to get, if we get 10, we'll take 10. So it's still going. We just haven't had luck with candidates yet.
More questions or comments, feedback?
That's the one, too.
It just helps people online to hear it. So, yeah.
Chief, for recruitment purposes, are you limited, and I assume you're not, but for purposes of residency of officers, do they have to live in the city?
No, so we, a few years ago, changed it where you just have to live in a county that touches Lancaster County, with the exception of you can't live in out of state. There's parts of that area that would dip into Maryland that you're not allowed to live in.
So it's not really a distance away in terms of how far, but just counties that touch this.
Correct.
I think the mayor never got to the question about home rule, which
Oh, yeah.
about 90% sure that home rule has nothing to do with firearms.
Correct.
State law, federal law.
Preempts everything. Yeah. Right behind you.
Thank you for both of you for coming. Appreciate it very much, and the work that you both do. I just had a question, you mentioned about the fentanyl, and I'm just curious, say 5 years ago, what is the level of drug activity? Is it better? Is it worse? Has it changed? How's it changed? Just kind of that.
I'd say where it's changed is, like when I first started, it was really crack cocaine. That was like the drug that we saw the most of. Slowly we saw a little bit of heroin coming into the city, but it wasn't to the level it is now. So I'd say while we're not making the crack cocaine arrest we used to, it's been replaced with the fentanyl and heroin. So it's I don't know if it's, I wouldn't say it's like out of control, and it's but it's definitely a lot coming into the city. And the issue with like the fentanyl is it's so deadly. I mean, it's just, that's where you're really seeing the issues where, and I wish I would have brought the stats.
I know.
but
I'm going to find
I
them.
don't have the stats, but it's amazing how many lives our officers are saving compared to other communities with the use of Narcan. But it's a problem. But again, the drug, that's more of, you're not going to police your way out of a drug problem. Why is there such a need for the drugs? Like, that's a society issue that we have to, as a community, figure out.
Do you think we're better off or worse off or the same than say 5 years ago? Or can't you really say?
I don't know. I would, to me, like, I think fentanyl's and heroin's really bad, so I would say it's worse, but I don't know crime-wise if there is a huge difference in the drug arrest from year to year.
I just have one quick question, because, you really do need community involvement to help get rid of these terrible problems, but how much fear is out there? I think there are a lot of people that maybe would get involved, but the fear factor is there. Maybe they're afraid of the drug dealer, or, what's going to happen to me if somebody finds out that I was giving some information to the police? So do you see a lot of that out there, or some of it, or?
Yeah, we see that, and it's a real fear. Like, they're living, you live in these communities that with this violence. I think a lot of it has to do with getting back to the community policing thing, where the community members feel comfortable with the officers. Like, I know when I was on bike, just the amount of interactions, you would talk to community members all the time, and they felt more of a connection with you. The car can be a barrier. So we're really, preaching to our officers, like, get out of your vehicle, walk your block, check the corner store. Like, you go into a corner stores and barbershops know a lot of stuff that goes on in the city. It does. You make that connection with them, you're going to get information. So.
Just following up on that before I pass it off, I know there is a community and police working group. Can you give an update on that? Is that group still meeting, and what are they focused on?
Yep, they're meeting monthly. Actually, there's a meeting, I believe, tonight or Monday for it. They meet once a month. It's still active. They work with us with creating ideas. I know last year we had a few events that they sponsored that we go to. A lot of it right now is idea exchanging. Like, we'll tell them, hey, this is an event we're thinking about. They'll give us feedback. I think an organization like that, you don't really necessarily hear a lot about or appreciate until you need them. And luckily right now we haven't really seen a need for them to be out, but very active.
I'd also just like to say that our investment in our neighborhood engagement efforts go to the heart of some of these issues. And so we've been working on a couple of blocks in the city that have had, we were really working before 2020, and then everything happened in 2020, and then we went back to the neighborhood to start re-engaging, and there's just a ton of turnover. And we also had, this was last summer, we also had a group of juveniles that were in and around that neighborhood that were getting into trouble, had guns, et cetera, et cetera. So one of our officers took it upon himself to organize with these young boys community cleanup, and so they were out and around Culleton Park and doing a bunch of stuff. Our neighborhood engagement team organized a bunch of other community-based organizations to, hey, we got to focus on this couple of blocks. There's some stuff that's going down here, and we really need to bring to the table all of our resources. So that was the school district, that was Community Action Partnership, that was the Boys and Girls Club, Crispus Addicts, all of us, like, what can we be doing? And I have to tell you, I felt like that was such a big success because you didn't read about it in the newspaper. Most people had no idea what we were doing or trying to work on, but we knew that things were about to like pop off and we needed to get a handle on it. And so that was really a partnership between the Bureau and a whole bunch of other community organizations. And that's part of what neighborhood engagement is about. Yes, you see Love Your Block and Neighborhood Leaders Academy and, a lot of things that are, people see as like feel good, but these are also, we're also working in our neighborhoods in ways that aren't visible to just the everyday person. And we can't let our police department just do this on their own. And so we're trying to work in concert. And so the neighborhoods are absolutely important. I've obviously made that a strategic priority of strong neighborhoods, and you cannot have strong neighborhoods if people don't feel like they're safe. And that's just foundational. So we have to have both.
So nationally, we're reading about a lot of special force in police and just the dilemma of how trained and how effective and how professional are they in that. And that police culture has a lot to do with how special forces will handle a project or an issue in a community. Curious to know what we're doing in Lancaster around police culture.
So that's actually one of the huge things we've been working on, and that the police culture, starts with the leadership. And if we have good leaders that are doing what we want and creating the culture that we want, it will trickle down to the officers. As far as the specialty units, I just talked with someone about today, and for Lancaster City, so I agree, specialty units, I think where a lot of the problems come into is when you have officers that are in these units for 10, 12, 13 plus years, and they have zero supervision. They've been in these units too long. We rotate our officers out of any specialty unit. So, and it's not just like one that you would think of that you're reading on the news. We have our mounted unit. Like we rotate them out now because when officers tend to be in a position too long, it has negative effects on the organization for a lot of reasons. Every leadership training I've gone to for policing says 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years. Do not keep anyone in a specialty unit more than 3 to 5 years. We're doing that now.
Thank you for both your service. The county relies on what the city does, and obviously safety is critical. 2 questions. I'll leave the second one for later. But my first question would be: I didn't hear any mention of gangs or organized crime. Is there any concerns there, or is there a metric where it's gone up or down currently?
So, yes, there are gangs that we deal with. I would say more of like neighborhood gangs, and a lot of it goes back to the juveniles. So we do see that, and a lot of our violent crime does have to do with that. And we have our detectives are constantly, looking at that and trying to really get a handle on that because they're ever changing in our community. So like we could have one small neighborhood gang pop up, and then in 6 months they're gone. They're not even an issue anymore, but it's a different one. So yes, we have a pretty good grasp on what's going on right now. But
my second question, to have a little fun sitting in front of the police chief. What's your favorite cop show?
So actually this is real easy. So I don't watch cop shows because it usually frustrates me because they usually put like the worst of the worst on, like it's literally like what you should not do as a cop that they put on. So yeah, I'm not a big movie guy either.
On that question, it sounds like. I'm gonna circle back over here. Here you go, Mike.
Thank you for the presentation, and I actually have a comment, not a question. But just in listening to you today, previous presentations we've had by previous chiefs have usually been I. I'm going to do this, and your whole talk has been we, and the team are going to do this. And I congratulate you. I think that's a significant change, and I personally appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Raise your hand. Oh, we got a couple over here. Okay. We'll start here and then we'll bump over to you. There you go.
Hi, nice to be with you today. Do you have any creative ideas for how businesses or community organizations could contribute to the safety and feelings of security in the city?
Yeah, so actually what we're doing is we just had some leadership change in our community engagement team, and they are working on reaching out to businesses in each community, like each neighborhood, and exploring options on how to get engaged and things we can work with them to do, to bring not just community engagement, but how we can help each other. So we did just start that, and we're working on trying to make those connections. And
Chamber, right? So talk to the chamber about that. That sounds like a great place to connect. We had a question here.
Thanks for coming. It's always good to have some dialogue. It's hard to believe it's just been 3 years since we had gatherings here in next to the police building. Some rather heated discussion, and out of that came a dialogue. And I was just wondering how we're doing on the plan that came out of those conversations in 2020.
So I think you're referring to our plan related to racial equity, and that, boy, I have to think about when we last updated that report, but we have been marching through that and have, I think, completed all of the commitments that we made in the midst of 2020. And we could do that because we had started that work before 2020, to be completely frank, because we would not have been able to make as many changes. But I will say that the additional changes that the one thing that we still haven't completed is that policy review, which you already heard Chief talk about. And then some of the other things that we're doing are not related to policing, but related to our organization overall. And there is a woman in our HR bureau whose position has been elevated to leadership and diversity manager, and the ways in which we're talking about diversity in our organization extend well beyond physical characteristics, but also include just the diversity of the kinds of jobs that we have at the City of Lancaster, and how we can talk about diversity in a way that, yes, recognizes, celebrates, and embraces some of the things that you typically think about related to diversity, and makes it clear that every person is coming to the table, and we want to make sure that there's equity in how we're treating every person. So we've made a number of policy changes. We've done a compensation review to make sure that we're compensating people equitably across the organization. And I think that the work that we're talking about now is really focusing on creating equity in our performance appraisal system, which is a bit of an arduous task, but our team is getting started on that. And then all of the culture change that you've just heard Chief Mendez talk about was one of those things that was embedded in our commitments, but really took the right leader. And now I believe we have that.
Thank you. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time. I wanted to go just back to our speakers to see if you had any final thoughts sort of in conclusion before we wrap up for today. And thank you for your time of being with us.
No, just thank you for having us. And I think if anything, just, these issues that we talk about, like, it's more than just the police department. We need the community. So I would just ask that any ideas, any help, bring them our way.
And I'll just thank Hourglass again. You've been a great partner to the city, and we appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you today. And stay warm. Yeah,